The king died toward dawn, the last of him spent in a rasping rattle that hung in the tapestries and lingered under the rafters like smoke. The chamber kept the nights chill despite so many lamps, and the air smelled of camphor and blood, a boar's musk that no washing had banished from his blankets. Eddard Stark had watched men die before, in the quiet drifting of old age, in the sudden wrench of battle, by slow fevers and quick steel. But there was something about a king's breath leaving his chest that turned every eye in the room into a mirror. It reflected the smallness of them, their faces pale in the lamplight. The little writing desk by the window held the parchment Robert had scrawled with a shaking hand, the words naming Ned as protector of the realm sealed under a blob of crimson wax that looked all too like a clot. "He is gone," Pycelle whispered, as if it were some fragile secret. His whiskers trembled. Varys drew his scented sleeve to his mouth and lowered his head. Littlefinger's expression was what it always was, the curve of his mouth amused as if none of this mattered. Renly Baratheon stood with his jaw tight, knuckles white on the back of a chair. The king's bed was suddenly only furniture. Ned's fingers found the parchment. He did not let himself look at Renly, or at the spider, or at the silver chain draped around Pycelle's neck. He thought of his daughters instead. He thought of the girls sleeping somewhere in this hive of limestone and secrets. "Witness," he said. His voice was iron in an iron place. "His Grace put his seal to this with his own hand. By this writ, I am named protector until the rightful heir is of age. This is the law." "The law," Littlefinger murmured, "is a lady with many lovers. But we've time to argue paternity later, Lord Stark. For the moment, the city will want a morning bell." Renly's mouth twitched. "The city will want more than bells. The lioness will be upon us by sunrise." The word lioness in that room felt like a lit brand. Ned turned to Barristan Selmy, old, white-haired, and spare, the only clean blade in the room. The Lord Commander had stood at the foot of the bed, and when Robert's last breath fled, he'd shut the king's eyes with a gentleness that was almost reverent. "Ser Barristan," Ned said, "you saw him sign. Will you serve peace and law?" "I will serve the king," the old knight said. "Who is the king, my lord?" "The true heir will be Stannis Baratheon," Ned said. "Until he is here to claim it, the realm needs order. You know the words that killed Jon Arryn. The seed is strong." Selmy's eyes flickered, the faintest crack in a wall. "We are men, Lord Stark, not gardeners." His gaze slid to the parchment, to the crown abandoned by a dead man, then back. He did not answer for a long breath. "If the hand is protector, the king's guard obeys the protector's lawful commands until a king is set above us. I'll not draw steel without cause." "You will have cause," Renly put in. "Cersei will not wait till breakfast to put a golden bastard on the throne." Ned set his hands on the desk, feeling the small grit of wax under his palm. The night outside was nearly gone, and yet it seemed to him that the true darkness had only now begun, that the Red Keep was a mountain of caves and all of them led down. "Ser Barristan," he said, "I ask your help to secure the Queen, for her own safety, for the safety of her children, and for the peace of the city." "The Queen," Pycelle croaked, "is the Queen. You cannot." "Grand Maester," Ned said flat, "this is done with the late king's authority. I will not quarrel with you in front of his corpse. Varys, send a bell to the September, send heralds to keep the streets calm. Lord Peter, I require the city watch to be posted at the Red Keep and at the Treasury. Janos Slint may bring 200 cloaks to the gates before first light. And I want the jail made ready." "The jail?" Littlefinger's smile thinned. "For whom, my lord?" "The Queen," Ned said, and in the silence there was not so much as a whisper from the dead. Renly's breath came out in a hiss that might have been praise or fear. "You'll have to be quick. If you mean to do this," Varys said gently, "you must do it now." They scattered like pieces from a board. Renly was first to move, his green cloak a small spill in the doorway. Varys slipped as if through a curtain, and Pycelle clutched at his chain and waddled after him. Littlefinger lingered, head tilted, mouth thoughtful, until Ned looked up and the man's glance slid away like oil. "I'll bring Slint," he said. But hearts are cheaper than coin today. Try not to spend yours too soon." Then he was gone. Ned stood alone with Barristan. The old knight's hand rested for an instant on the dead man's brow. "Robert was my king," he murmured. "I saw him break the line at the trident. He was a storm then." He straightened, the steel returned to his spine. "What you ask is heavy, Lord Stark." "What I ask is the law," Ned said, and was surprised to hear in himself a small, cold fury. "When morning comes, they'll crown a lie if we let them. Go with me, Ser Barristan. If any can make this lawful in the eyes of men, it is you." The black cells were not named for their walls. The darkness there was a stew that ate light, a damp, old breath of stone and mildew and the memory of long-kept secrets. Ned took his own torch, refusing the stewards, and went down with Tomard and Desmond and 5 more of his men in mail shirts that murmured with each tread. The steps were narrow as a miser's heart. At the bottom, a lantern swung on its hook. The jailer sat under it like a spider, a long, pale man with a thin mouth and eyes sleepy with the night. "Ruggin," Tomard said, as if greeting a neighbor who might be told to sweep his step. The jailer's gaze drifted to Ned, then up to the torch. "Lord Hand," Ruggin murmured, rising with a fluidity that seemed more like water than flesh. His keys jangled a tired little tune. "The black cells are seldom visited by fine lords. What grace brings you down, if a man may ask it?" Ned stepped into the light. "You keep a clean jail, I trust. As clean as ghosts keep themselves." Ruggin's hand slid to his ring of keys and back again. "Shall I wake the under-jailers?" "You'll do," Ned said. "Find me a cell dry and empty. You will receive a noble guest. She is not to be touched. She is not to be spoken to except for the needs of food and water. You will answer only to me and to Ser Barristan Selmy." Ruggin's stare was blank for one heartbeat, another, and then he bowed so low his hair brushed the floor. "A noble guest," he said softly. "The walls have never had better company." When Ned left the dark, he felt it in his bones, a chill that the torches only argued with. Dawn had begun to bleed at the edges of the eastern clouds. The towers of the Red Keep were a row of teeth against a paling sky. They went to the Queen's apartments in a gray world that had not yet chosen to be morning. The corridors were cool, the rushes on the floors clean, servants' faces pale and uncertain behind their hands. The door ward was Ares Oakhart, pale as the light itself, white cloak like frost. He watched them approach with the shuttered face of a man who had learned to keep his doubts locked behind his eyes. "Ser Ares," Barristan said, "by the authority of the Hand as protector we enter." Oakhart's glance slid to Ned and back, measuring the parchment in Ned's fist as much as the man. Mandan Moore was inside, and Boros Blunt and Marin Trant. Ned heard their voices before he saw them, a hush of steel in soft scabbards. Jory would have had a word at the door, a joke to loosen his own jaw. Jory was dead in a puddle on the cobbles, and the memory of that blood lent Ned's voice an edge. "Open," he said, and Tomard's knuckles beat once, twice. The door swung inward. Cersei stood by the window, hair loose like poured gold, night robe white as bone. She had not slept. That much was a scent in the air. Joffrey was a tight knot near the hearth, and Myrcella had a shawl clutched to her chest, eyes big above it. Tommen snored softly under a mound of blankets. Boros Blunt's cheeks quivered above his gorget. Marin Trant's eyes were stones. Mandan Moore did not look at anything at all. Renly had been right. There was no time left in this place. It had been used up in the king's last rasping hours. "Your Grace," Ned said. He set the parchment on the table where the light could find it. "Robert named me protector. In that office, I place you in protective custody until Lord Stannis arrives to claim what is his." Cersei's laugh was a thin thing. "You will not touch me." Barristan's voice cut like a bell. "Your Grace, we will do this with courtesy. You will be kept safe. No harm will come to you. You presume I am afraid of harm." Her eyes were green water over glass. "Joffrey is king now. He requires my counsel. You'll not take a mother from her son." Joff took a half step toward them, chin lifted. "You're traitors," he said, in a voice that would one day be a man's and was not yet. "All of you, Ser Marin." "Hold," Barristan said, and the word was iron. "No one draws blade in this room." Oakhart looked to his Lord Commander, then to the Queen, and sweat sprang at his hairline. The lamplight made him younger and older at once. Ned felt the air in his lungs like winter and half prayed for Jory's rough humor to say that this had all been a mistake and they were come for wine. He had none. He had only the knowledge that in hesitation lay ruin. "Ser Mandan," he said, fixing his eyes on the mask-like face under the white hood. "Will you obey the office instituted by the late king's writ?" Mandan's lids moved, a slow animal blink. "I will obey the king," he said. "Then you obey the law until a king be set in the sight of gods and men. Step aside." Ned did not raise his voice. He drew his honor about him like a mantle, as if honor could be armor. And in that blink Oakhart breathed out and moved a pace aside, and Boros Blunt swallowed and shifted his fat body just enough. Cersei's mouth curve never faltered, though a pulse beat fast at the base of her throat. "You cannot believe this holds," she said softly. "Sooner or later the truth of steel will come for you. It has come for men dearer than I." Ned turned to Tomard. "Gently," he said. "Your grace you will dress. You'll be given servants. You may take a maid of your choosing and one lady companion." "Fools," Joffrey hissed, but when Barristan's hand settled on the boy's shoulder, that hand light as only the hand of a man who had put kings on thrones could be, Joffrey flinched as if the pressure burned. Sansa's feet were bare. Ned knew it before he saw her face, because the rushes whispered when she came, because the sound of his daughter running toward danger had begun to unthread his heart before he could stop it. She burst past Desmond with the unthinking courage of a child and then froze at the sight, hands lifted to her collar as if to hold her body together. "Father," she said when she found her breath, a little plaintive thread. "They'll wake the whole keep." "It's already awake," Ned said, not looking away from the Queen. "Sansa, go back to your rooms. Stay with Arya." "My lady," Cersei said, warmth, the kind used to pour honey, suddenly filling her voice. "Surely you would not let these northern brutes lay hands upon a queen. Tell your father it is wrong. Use that pretty tongue in which you so love to sing." Sansa trembled in the doorway, hovering between habit and shock. Through the narrow crack Ned caught a glimpse of Arya behind her sister, hair tangled, eyes bright as river stones. And beyond them, Syrio Farrell's face appeared and vanished in the candle shadows. A ghost watching in silence, weighing the dance before it began. "You'll go," Ned said to his daughters. He had no room for softness. Now, Cersei was taken at sunrise, cloaked in a dark mantle and flanked by white cloaks who did not meet her eye. Her maid clutched at her skirts and sobbed, and Cersei did not spare her a glance. Her gaze kept to the space in front of her, as if she walked alone. The corridors seemed suddenly loud, full of bright-eyed people pretending not to look, and the torches made puddles of fire on the floor. Ned walked beside Barristan, the black of Tomard's eyes on his back like a steadying weight. When they reached the stair down, the Queen turned her face to him. "You think this makes you strong," she said. "No," Ned answered. "It makes me responsible." She gave him a look so bright it seemed to knife him. "Responsibility will hang you sooner than any cord." The jailer's lantern twitched when they came, and Ruggan's keys moved like a small broken song. At the cell, Cersei went in without a flinch. She turned once and let her gaze touch Barristan's face, and something like pity, but colder, moved between them. Then the door boomed shut and the lock took her name into itself and gave nothing back. Barristan lifted his head and drew a breath like a man coming out of water. "There will be riots," he said as they climbed. "There will be order," Ned answered, "if we are men enough to keep it." The bells began then, somewhere beyond the walls, the city waking up to death with noise that reached even to this cold heart of stone. The sound climbed and trembled and poured itself into the sky. Ned thought of the morning bells in Winterfell, of the sound of crows calling over white fields, and wanted for a heartbeat to be in that smaller world again, to be only a lord of snow and wolves. He had a realm instead. He had enemies with gilded teeth. They met the city watch at the gate of the inner ward, a wedge of yellow cloaks under Janos Slint's heavy belly. Littlefinger had kept his word. The man had come. His eyes made small quick counts, and in the flicker of them Ned read a mind measuring weight and gold. "Lord Stark," Slint said, breath cloudy in the chill. "I hear the bells, but they tell me a hand's tale too. The Queen's under guard." "She is safe," Ned said. "I expect you to keep wayfish talk out of the streets. Post men at the Red Keep, the Treasury, the gates. You'll answer for your officers, Janos." Janos smiled like fat congealing. "I answer for myself," he said. "My men answer for themselves. And we all answer to coin." "Today," Ned said, "you answer to law." Something in his voice carried, and something in Barristan's quiet presence, and in the white of cloaks and the hard eyes of Northmen and the clamor of bells that kept on knelling as if they were the heartbeat of the whole city. Slint's mouth worked, and he bowed enough to be called one. "As you say, my lord. Captain Bywater will post the gates." From the rank behind, a rangy man with a scar like rope along his jaw stepped forward and set a fist to his breast. "Ser Jacelyn," Slint said, as if the name were a morsel he'd plucked from his plate with reluctance. "Do as the hand orders." Bywater's gaze met Ned's and held. There was something watchful there, something that looked like a spine. Varys was at Ned's elbow as they walked back. He had a way of being in every elbow's shadow. "Well done," he said gently. "A quick hand stops a deep cut. Now we have only to bleed to death more slowly." "Send ravens," Ned said, "to Dragonstone, to Storm's End, to Winterfell. Lord Stannis must be bidden to come with all speed to take his throne." "Lord Stannis is a slow wind," Varys murmured, "but he blows hard when he comes. As for Storm's End, if you mean Renly, the boy has already gone to saddle his horse. He is quick where his brother is thorough." Renly had indeed gone. His green cloak vanished through a postern gate before the bells sang thrice. Loras Tyrell waited with him in the yard, already in the saddle, and their exchange was a flash of color against the dawn. They did not look back. At the small council that morning, there were fewer chairs. The table was a polished map where all the rivers were small as threads. The torch tower cast a long finger over the crownlands. Varys perched like a genial raven. Pycelle made a long, careful business of sitting. His breath wheezed. Littlefinger came last, his hair in place, his eyes amused. "Where's Lord Renly?" Pycelle said in the tone of an old man who has misplaced his spectacles. "Riding," Littlefinger answered. He remembered an appointment in the Reach. Ned set the parchment between them again. "By the late king's will, I am protector. The queen has been placed under guard. Her children are confined to their rooms under Ser Barristan Selmy's protection. Any attempt to interfere will be considered treason against the realm. Ravens have flown to Dragonstone." Littlefinger's smile did not falter, but his fingers touched the table as if to measure its grain. "Brisk," he said. "How do you plan to pay for briskness?" "The Treasury," Ned said and watched his eyes. "Ah, the Treasury." Peter steepled his fingers. "It's a poor cow you mean to milk. We have, by my last account, a great many promises wearing gold paint." "Open it," Ned said. "I'll see the accounts this morning, and I want a list of the watch officers. We'll need names of those loyal." "What a heavy word, loyal," Littlefinger said. "It breaks backs if a man isn't careful." He sighed then, an elegant, theatrical thing. "You have made things interesting, Lord Stark. I shall do my best to be useful. It's a bad habit I've never been rid of." "Be useful by telling me what Janos Slint costs," Ned said, "and whether he has already been paid." Littlefinger met his gaze and for an instant let him see something sharp and bright as the edge of a coin. "Coins buy different men different days," he said. "Janos is expensive because his days are short."
Ned stood.
He had not slept, and the back of his head throbbed with a dull, steady ache, and the weight of the city had begun to press into the bone of his shoulders. It would be a relief to be riding in snow. As he turned, Varys's voice followed him. so soft that even the windows did not seem to notice it. "Lord Stark." A word. He waited. The eunuch came up with steps like a cat's. For a moment they were alone among the painted rivers. "There will be men who will try to open that cell," Varys said. "You'll need to watch doors that have no hinges." "Who?" "The ones who are everyone in particular," Varys said with mild humor. "I think it would comfort the realm if Littlefinger were given time to consider the view from a quiet room for a few days." "Is that your way of telling me he holds the key to the watch?" "It is my way of telling you that if he keeps his hands, they will find keys." Ned nodded once. When he returned to the council chamber 15 minutes later, Littlefinger smiled as if they were old friends and did not look surprised when Tomard laid a hand on his shoulder. "For my own protection," he said lightly, "I hope the room has a window." "It has a bed," Tomard said, not unkindly, and led him away. In the queen's cell, the light from the torch was a sting. The stones were damp, and the air tasted of iron. Ruggan's shadow stretched long behind him. Cersei sat on the bench like a woman at her dressing table, composed, palms smooth on her knees. "Lord Varys," she said. The jailer's mouth moved against his teeth, and then he smiled the smile of a man who had put on a new mask and found that it fit perfectly. "Your Grace," he murmured. "I am but the humble servant of this humble place." "Spare me humility," she said without heat. "Go tell your northern goat that he has trapped himself in his own honor. Tell him that my father has never been patient with insult. Tell him the wolf's belly is soft. Tell him anything that makes him hurry." Ruggan's eyes closed briefly, as if he had smelled a far spice. "All I tell him is that he should lock his doors well," he said. "The rest you will tell him yourself before the month is out. You always contrive to find the upper stair, Your Grace." Cersei lifted her chin. In the dimness, gold gleamed at her temple. "If this ends with me on those steps," she said, "I will not go alone." Above the ground, the red keep breathed and seethed. Rumor ran like a bright trout down every corridor. The word queen traveled like a spark in dry grass. The word arrested provoked a collective gasp that was immediately swallowed into living. The kitchens argued about flour. A turnspit cried. The kennels barked the same dog bark they had barked every morning since Aegon the Dragon came with fire. Sansa held a cup she did not want and stared at the wall. Septa Mordain talked on, her quiet voice the sound of rain on a slate roof. The window let in a gray light that made everything honest. She thought of Joffrey. She pictured his hair, the way his hands looked when he smoothed his cloak, the way he smiled when he was being kind, and the way he smiled when he was not. Knights in old songs rode into rooms and made everything right with a kiss. There was no song for this. Arya stood at the far end of the room, wooden sword at her hip, chin lifted. She had not slept at all. She had crept out once, and Syrio had been there as if he had known, and they had gone down to the shadowed practice room where stone pillars gleamed with old polish and their breath smoked, and they had moved like ghosts. He had not said anything, only gestured, as if the dance were a language and Dawn another word learned. "Father will fix it," Arya said now, fierce and certain, as if the idea were a blade she could brandish. Sansa wanted that certainty and did not know where to find it. "He arrested the queen." Arya's mouth quirked. "Good. She was to be my... She was going to be..." Sansa could not finish. She set the cup down because her hands shook. It was all wrong. Arya came to her and impulsively, carelessly, threw her arms around Sansa for a heartbeat. They fit easy for once. "We'll go home," she said into Sansa's hair. "We'll ride, and there will be snow, and we'll have hot broth with onions, and I'll kick you in the leg when you call me a savage, and you'll tell me I hold the spoon wrong, and it will be stupid and beautiful like always." Sansa, in spite of herself, laughed. She caught the laugh with both palms, frightened by it, and let it go again because it demanded air. "I hate broth with onions." "You liar," Arya said, and grinned, and the room felt warmer. They were sent for at noon. Ned stood at the far end of the solar with a look that was not sternness and not softness either, but the tired steadiness of a man whose boots had been wet all day. He kissed Sansa's hair and Arya's brow in turn, and for a breath they were Winterfell again. "You'll keep to your rooms except with my permission," he said. "Syrio will come, you'll do your lessons. You will not wander. The city's a stirred pot." "Will you send for Robb?" Arya asked. "He'll come with gray wind and bite people." Ned's mouth twitched. "Robb has his own part to play. There's trouble in the Riverlands. The Lannisters drew first blood while men still thought we were friends." He paused. "We will not be friends again." At the end of day, pyres burned by the Great September, and a wave of heat rolled across the plaza that tasted of pitch and grief. Men wept for Robert, men who could not remember exactly why they loved him other than that he had once made them feel like life had more color. The small folk said prayers that were bargains. The gold cloaks stood in pairs like brass statues and did not fidget because their captain was watching. Janos Slynt did not sleep that night. He counted his coin and counted it again. After midnight, a shadow loomed in his doorway. Slynt reached for the knife that lived under his pillow and got it out and then put it away because the shadow became a man who would not be cut. A man with a white beard and a very straight back. "Ser Barristan," Slynt said. "Do you travel without knocking?" "I travel without being stopped," Barristan replied. "Go to your feet." Slynt went, blinking, and tried to make his mouth into a smile and failed. "We're all friends here." "I am a friend to the law," Barristan said. "And the law requires that the watch should serve the realm, not the purse. You'll keep this peace or answer for it." "Who says there is peace?" Slynt asked. "There is only time." "Then use it well," the old knight said, and left him in the long night with his coins. Far away in a place of tents that smelled of men and horses and damp wool, Tywin Lannister put a hand flat on a map. He had not slept either. The news had come like a misfired arrow, unexpected and troublesome, humming as it passed the ear. The queen arrested, the hand clutching parchment like a rope. A man of lesser temper would have flung goblets. Tywin waited and asked for a better chair. Kevin came and stood with shoulders squared and eyes steady. Ser Adam Marbrand paused by the tent flap, helmet in the crook of his arm. In a corner, a man in browned mail rubbed oil into a sword, the sound of cloth on steel steady as a heart. "They intend to hold her as pledge," Kevin said. He had always known how to say the thing that must be said with neither flattery nor fear. Tywin did not lift his hand. He stared at a point where the Blackwater met the sea. "They intend to mistake a bear for a dog." A fly buzzed. He did not move to swat it. "The boy will whimper and the city will imagine this is justice. The boy will flare into rage and the city will imagine this is strength. Neither will be enough." Kevin nodded. "What will you do?" "We are already doing it." Tywin's mouth was a hard line. "Riverrun has been a bat biting at our horses. Jaime presses there. They took our dwarf and then, like fools, let him go." His eyes slid briefly to the man in the corner. "We will answer with steel for every offense. And for Cersei," he paused, "they will learn that a Lannister's wife is not a hostage but a banner. They have hoisted her against us. Now our men will rally. Ser Adam, send riders down the King's Road. Spread tale that wolves have taken our queen. The small folk are not clever, but they are certain on one point. They prefer their rulers gilded. They will not love a protector who drags queens down steps." "And in the city?" Kevin asked. "Coin buys cloaks. You have always said so." "I have always known so," Tywin corrected. "Coin buys a little time. Fear buys more. Send word to those in the Red Keep who answer to us. There are always doors within doors. If the eunuch breathes, our man will smell it. If the hand sleeps, our man will hear it. I want an attempt made." "It will fail," Kevin said, without doubt in his tone. Tywin's mouth twitched, a movement so small it could have been a flaw in the lamplight. "That is not the point. They must lie awake." Tyrion Lannister had a different tent under a different sky, a ragged little niche of canvas halfway down a mountain road, with a patch of old fur for a bed and a wineskin that tasted of goat. He sat wrapped in a cloak taken from a dead clansman. He had not killed himself and watched the embers blink. Bronn snored on the far side, neither loud nor quiet, like a practical man breathing. You always find a way to be at the part where the interesting thing is not, Tyrion told the fire. The wind answered. He had left the Vale with a head full of plans and a purse full of nothing, and had made both pay for him along the high road. He had found men with facial tattoos who liked knives. He had bought them with jokes and the promise of better plunder. And now, in the battered camp of his father, he had been told to sit and drink and be quiet while giants decided how to move a world toward stomping. Then the tidings had come. He had laughed because, if he had not, the thought of Cersei in a cell would have made him bite his hand. He did not love his sister, but he knew her as one knows the smell in one's own house. She would not forgive this. She would not forgive the city, the hand, the jailer, or the guards who let their eyes rest on her a heartbeat too long. She would not forgive Tyrion for being out here while she sat in dark. He had always known that a day would come when he would have to choose whether to be a Lannister's dwarf or his own man. That day had come with less fanfare than he'd expected. "Up," he said at dawn to Bronn and kicked his boot. "We're going to court." "King's Landing's a long walk," Bronn replied, opening one eye. "Not that court," Tyrion said. "The court of wings that go very fast." He pulled on his cloak. "My father will want a man who can talk. It will be a novelty." Stannis Baratheon. Stannis's eyes were cold blue. Pieces of the morning sky. He lifted the letter again, read it as if the words might change, and then folded it with impossible neatness and set it back down. "We sail," he said, "with what strength we have." He paused, and something like a wry smile, so slight it had to be searched for, passed over his face. "We shall bring the onion night, and his smell shall frighten our enemies." Davos bowed so low his cap touched the floor. Outside, the gulls were already arguing over the day. The trial was not called a trial. It was a hearing, a word that felt smaller, safer, something that might be picked up and put down without blood. Yet when the small folk pressed themselves against the iron bars of the outer yard to glimpse the white of cloaks and the gray of Ned's eyes, they made the sound that men make when they are watching a fight. Cersei was brought out into the daylight for the first time in 4 days. She had not wasted in that time. She had refined. She walked like a woman who had invented walking. Her hair had been braided by her maid into a crown. Someone had polished her hands. She did not look at the crowd. She did not look down. She looked at the dais where the Protector's chair stood and the space beside it for the Lord Commander. And her mouth's corners quirked in a little smile whose audience was only herself. Ned felt a harder fatigue than any he had known in the snow. It lived in his marrow now. He had Varys's whispers, careful as a weaver's shuttle, telling him which doors tried at which hours. He had Slint's sullen courtesy. He had letters from the Riverlands with ink like dried tears. He had sent a raven to Winterfell that read like a father's heart laid bare, and another to Riverrun that read like a vassal's debt called in. He had the knowledge that Renly had flown to the Reach to find roses with swords hidden in them, and that Stannis, if the winds were honest, was already cutting Blackwaters green with oars. Barristan stood at his right hand. Pycelle slumped, the weight of his chain bearing him down. Varys was dapper as ever, with eyes like painted eggs. Ser Jacelyn Bywater loomed by the steps, his gold cloak plain and his gaze unflinching. Joffrey sat in a smaller chair, not much lower than Ned's, and swung one foot in a steady rhythm that matched the hammering inside Ned's skull. "Your Grace," Ned said to the boy. He had not desired to sit him there, but the sight of the child had a way of turning men soft. "You are not here as king. You are here as a prince and as the subject of a question." Joffrey's eyes were chips of glass. "I'm here because I want to watch a traitor hang himself." Cersei's laughter cut over the murmurs with a clean, bright edge. "Listen, all of you," she said in a voice that had made courtiers stand taller. "Listen to the northern savage. He drags me from my bed like a thief, and now he feigns courtesy." Ned let it pass. "I will present what I know." The hand before me died asking a simple question. Why were all the king's children dark, when their father was light? He wrote before he died. I have the book he used. He studied the lineages of noble houses and learned the truth that hair tells as well as eyes. He found no Baratheon in the seed you call royal. Hycel's whiskers twitched. Lord, all this has been contested by wiser heads then. Names are not contests, Ned said. They are facts. I call witnesses. He called the armorer from the Street of Steel. A boy with a bull's head and a blank stare and a black thatch so like the dead kings that even the small folk saw it and hissed. He called the mother of another bastard who trembled and showed them a boy's forelock that matched. He set the book on the table, opened to page upon page of marriages and births and the simple, stark recitation of features, coal and gold, jet and chestnut, and the way the gold never made it quietly with black without showing itself somewhere down the line. It was simple. It was ugly. It was made of ink and the world. Cersei let him finish. When he was done, she turned her head and looked at the crowd as if she had found something amusing there. "What is a bastard?" she said. "Words again. A man writes a book and thinks he is the god who speaks men into being. A child is what the mother says he is. A child," Barristan said softly, "is what the father makes him. Then my son is the son of the man who has made him king," Cersei said, smiling, and in that instant a ripple went through the crowd like a fish unseen. It was true and it was not. It was bravado and confession. It was a queen's last card played as if she had a deck full. Ned put his hand on the parchment and felt the dried wax. Joffrey Baratheon is not the son of Robert Baratheon in blood. He cannot inherit his crown. By law and by the late king's writ, the throne passes to Lord Stannis. Joffrey half stood, face blotched, voice high. "Seize him," he commanded, and then looked in confusion around him because half the men in the yard did not move at all. Bywater did not move. Barristan did not move. Mandon Moore's hand twitched, and then stilled when Barristan's hand settled on his forearm with the grace of a butterfly that nonetheless could stop a beast. Cersei saw the stillness and knew what it meant, and in knowing she won back something. Her gaze slid to Ned and rested there. "You have done it wrong," she said, too soft for the yard to hear. "You should have killed us in the night." "I am not the king you fear," Ned said. "No," she replied. "You are the fool I needed." She turned to go, and her chains clinked like jewelry. When the guards took her, she walked as if to a feast. At dusk, a raven landed with a weight that made the rookery shake, and the message on its leg was a cyclone folded small. Stannis was 3 leagues off the mouth of the river with 10 galleys and more cogs and hoys than any counter could count, and he would come in the morning on the tide. I'll want to be crowned from the steps of the Sept," Varys said, reading over Ned's shoulder with the light interest of a man remarking on the weather. "He will demand oaths. It will make such a fine picture." "Let him paint," Ned said. "We need the world to be convinced. If it takes a picture, we'll make one." The attempt came that night as surely as a sneeze follows a sniff. It came along 3 corridors and out of a privy shaft, and by a bribe whispered to a drunk guard who was not there because Barristan's hand had placed him elsewhere. Bywater's men took 2 with knives and 1 with a garrote and 1 with poison that his own ring dispensed. Varys walked the halls like a wisp of perfume and collected bits of news as other men collect pebbles. Tomard broke a thumb. Desmond was cut, shallow, and swore cheerfully over the blood. Ruggan found a body and did what men who are not jailers do with bodies. When morning came, the queen was still in her cell, and the dawn smelled of copper. Ned slept for an hour in a chair with his hand on his sword hilt and dreamed of a great white hart running through the gods' wood with a crown tangled in its antlers. He woke to the sound of distant gulls and the sharper sound of Arya breathing by the door. She had crept there and fallen asleep, hatchet brave and holy a child, and his heart tightened. He had scarce let himself touch her hair when the door opened without knocking and Barristan's shadow came before his voice. "He is come," the old knight said simply. Stannis Baratheon came like a storm taught to measure itself. He did not hurry, and did not smile, and did not waste his eyes. He went ashore in a black doublet that made him look even more like a forged thing than usual and walked up the steps as if each one owed him something. Beside him moved men with salt in their bones and scars that no squire's training yard gave. Davos Seaworth came too, his face plain as bread. There were nobles behind, Celtigar in his coral, Valerion with seafoam in his pride, a handful of others, and there were fewer soldiers than Ned might have liked. At the Great September, Ned did the thing the realm required of him. He knelt. It was not in him to bend as easily as some men, but he put his knee to the stone and the sound of it rang, and he saw out of the corner of his eye Barristan's white head lean in unison. The High Septon prated blessings. Stannis endured them, and when his head was touched with the crown there was a murmur that ran through the city like a breeze through winter wheat. It was not the shout that had greeted Robert. It was smaller and more uneasy and honest. "Rise," Stannis said to Ned, and his voice carried like a hammer on cold iron. "You have done a hard and lawful thing." The corners of his mouth moved as if surprised by their own impulse. "I misliked you when you came to my brother's table. I misliked you when you sent me to Dragonstone like a man hiding shame. I do not mislike this." "Your Grace," Ned said. He did not have smiles either. "The Queen is in my charge." "She is in mine now," Stannis replied. "The king's enemies belong to the king." He turned his head and his eye found Barristan. "Lord Commander, you will bring my nephews and niece to me." Barristan's pause was of a man who did not want to speak because truth would come out. "Your Grace," he said at last, "they are not your blood." "I have a duty to them," Stannis said. "I always did." He drew a breath as if the air were a thing he had to earn. "I will not be Joffrey with smaller wrists. They will be kept safe. They will be treated as befits children whose mother must be judged. They will be given tutors and walls and a place where the world cannot reach them. They will not see their mother's trial." The trial fell into the room like a great slow bird. Cersei met the news with a smile that could cut the world. She sat in a chamber above the cells now, one whose window admitted a piece of sky and a square of sea. She had been moved because kings prefer not to descend, not because she had earned air. When Stannis came to see her, she rose. When he closed the door, she sat again. "You are the dullest of my husband's brothers," she said, and made it sound like a love song. "At least Renly would have black feathers to preen. You have always been gray." Stannis stared at her as if she were a ledger. "Confess," he said. "Make the world honest, if only once." Cersei's laugh was not merry. "Honesty is fool's coin. You'll be poor by noon." She leaned back and crossed one leg over the other with calculated indifference. "You won a crown and now find it made of nettles. Enjoy it." "I will do my duty," Stannis said. "Your duty," she returned, "is a small, dry word. It is also the only true lover you ever had." She tilted her head. "The boy is not yours to break." "I will not break him," Stannis said, and for the first time something like heat entered his voice. "Your father is breaking the realm around him. He will come. This city will be a skull on a pike unless it has teeth of its own. You and yours must be weighed. That is justice." "Justice," Cersei echoed, her face smooth. "The cat eats the mouse and tells itself a hymn." When he had gone, Varys came as a shadow and Ruggan as a man, and then neither as anything. He stood by the window with hands folded, looking shorter and fatter and more a eunuch than he did elsewhere. "The wheel creaks," he said conversationally. "Does it crush you?" Cersei asked, bored. "I am made of softer stuff," Varys said. "I am crushed daily. It keeps me modest." He eyed the square of sea with a small, wistful tilt of his head. "You and the Lord Protector have done me a kindness I cannot repay. You have made of this city a harp with 4 strings, each slightly out of tune, and the music of it is ravishing." "You grinning spider," Cersei said. "I remember you standing like a pink tower at Aerys' side. You are always where the wax melts." "That I?" "Because I am very good at getting candle on me," Varys said with a little sigh. "When the flames run, I try not to be there." He turned. "If you would like to be free." Cersei's eyes sharpened. Ah, Varys agreed. "Sometimes a jail is only a door. Sometimes a door is only a painted wall. Sometimes a wall is a friend. I would kill all my friends to walk through one, Cersei said. Then light streamed in a long stripe across the floor where a window invited it. Cersei walked in with her hair coiled and her wrists bare. They had offered to bind her. She had laughed. She stood alone in the center, and every eye was a needle, and she was the thread that had to pass through them. Ned presented again what he had, and others added what they could. Pycelle's ponderous notes about subtleties of line. The book, The Black-Haired Bastard Boy, Whispers, The Memory of Jon Arryn's Last Days. Cersei listened as if being entertained by a juggler. When it came time for her to speak, she did so without turning to anyone. I did what I must, she said. I found love where there was none, and made a king where there was a brute. I gave the realm a day's order where it had none. Your law is a pretty thing, Lord Stark. I have a different law. It begins and ends where my children do. And your father's? Stannis asked. Does his law begin and end at your bed? My father's law is a spear, she said. It knows where to point. Stannis's mouth tightened. The realm is not your bed and not your father's spear. He turned to the High Septon. Pronounce sentence. The old man stammered, then found a voice in himself he must have had stored away for years. Queen Cersei, you are found guilty of high treason in the making of false issue to the crown, of attempting to usurp rightful succession, and of sundry treacheries against the peace of the realm. You shall be confined until your death is decided. May the gods have mercy on your soul if they can find it. The murmur that followed was a ripple of satisfaction and fear and curiosity. Cersei's lips curved. Decide quickly, she called, and the echo took her words and made them unreasonably large. My father is coming. He was. Word came of lances like a field of wheat rolling down the King's Road, of banners with crimson and gold, of a great army moving not in haste, because it did not need to, but in the untroubled firmness of men who have always had everything. The sound of it came before the dust, and the dust came before the men, and the city leaned on its walls and listened at its own breath. Tyrion was among the van with a forced gallows cheer. He rode with Kevin and an honor guard that looked like an executioner's parade. The closer he got, the more the city seemed to him to be a woman behind a veil. He could not yet see the cheekbones, but he could make out the eyes. He remembered too many nights in too many taverns where every eye was a hazard, and laughed softly to the horse under him. We'll play their game, he told the animal, and try not to let them choose the board. The parley was held on a strip of ground within bowshot of the walls, under the eyes of archers who did not blink. Stannis did not leave his place. Tyrion went to him with Kevin and with Adam Marbrand and with a priest who insisted on being there because he knew how to make symbols. Ned stood behind the king's shoulder with a face like F. Ross, you have my sister, Tyrion said by way of greeting. I've been told you have her somewhere safe. I struggle to imagine what that means. It means she is alive, Stannis said. And will remain so? That depends on her, Stannis said. And on your father. Tyrion scratched at his chin. My father is not the best listener, as you may have heard. However, he can be persuaded to trade. He looked up at the walls, at the crenellations like teeth. He would offer gold and peace for the queen. The peace that leaves us with a false king at our gates? Ned said. Your peace is a wolf with sheep's teeth. Peace is often not bred, Tyrion said mildly. She's a creature found half-starved by the road, with burrs in her coat, and if you can coax her to the hearth, sometimes she curls and sleeps. If you'd rather drive her away, I'll not weep, but I like dogs. Stannis's glance slid once to Ned, who said nothing. We will consider terms, Stannis said. When the Lord of Casterly Rock bends his knee and swears fealty to his king. Tyrion smiled. Ah, and there's the burr, your grace. My grace is not a negotiation, Stannis replied. Everything is a negotiation, Tyrion said, and for a heartbeat it was almost possible to like him. Even what you think is duty, especially that. Tell your father, Stannis said, standing like an iron post, that I will not sell my crown for his silence. He knows as much of crowns. Tell him to bring all his banners and see what the city looks like to him if he lives to look. When they turned away from parley, Tyrion said to Kevin without turning his head, "We're going to have to find the soft place under this city's ribs." Kevin's jaw worked. "We'll find it," he said, and there was no boast in the words, only a statement like a farmer announcing rain. Varys found Ned that night by a window, where the wind off the Blackwater licked at the candle flames and made the room a shy thing. "You played your piece, my lord," he said. "Well done. The queen is caged. The king is crowned. The lion is roaring at the gate. Now comes the part where Littlefinger's move men like fleas." "Littlefinger sits in a cell," Ned said. "He will be tried when there is time." "Oh, there is always time for a man like that," Varys said sweetly. "He makes it like a weaver making cloth where there had been only air. You have cut the largest strings. He will find the smallest." "I did not see you at the trial," Ned said after a time. "I am always at trials," Varys said. "Sometimes as the bar, sometimes as the rope." "Do you sleep?" "Poorly. Sleep more poorly tonight," Varys murmured. "Your daughters are beloved of the city when the city wants to love. When it wants to hate, it will remember that they are wolves, and wolves do not look well with their heads on spikes." He spread his hands. "I say this only because holding a crown tends to occupy a man's fingers. He forgets he holds something else." Ned stayed by the window until the candle coughed itself out. He thought of Sansa's careful voice and Arya's wild little footfall. He thought of Robb, who would even now be gathering his banners and fretting when he should be sleeping. He thought of Cat, who would be walking into trouble because she had never been persuaded that standing still could be a kind of bravery. In the morning, Tywin moved his men 2 miles closer, and the drums began. The city is a creature with a belly. You can hear it growl. The market made its little noises. There was bread. There was not enough meat. There was gossip heavy with grease. The faith sent men with bowls. The whores laughed in the sun, but with a tightness. The gold cloaks liked the weight of spear shafts in their palms when they grew frightened. A child dropped an apple and cried as if all the world had been taken from him. It was a normal day. It was the day before something. Barristan watched over the prince and princess in rooms that had once been full of laughter and now were full of careful silence. Myrcella sat with a book she did not read. Tommen looked out the window and tried not to cry and failed because he was young and because he loved his mother with the simplicity of a boy who had never been required to doubt. Joffrey was kept elsewhere under guard. He paced until he made grooves in the carpet and then sat and planned the death of every man who had ever told him no. "Will he kill her?" Myrcella whispered to Barristan. He had told her to call him Ser Barristan, not grand names, and she had obeyed because that was what she did. "He will judge her," Barristan said. "He will do what the law says he must." "The law says many different things," the girl replied, surprising him. "The law says one thing," he said. "Men say many different things." When he left, he found Ruggan in the corridor with a bowl of pears, which he offered with a simper. "They are sweet," Ruggan said, "and sweetness is rare. I have no taste for it," Barristan said amiably, refusing not the fruit but the conversation, and passed on. Later, he would think of that bowl of pears long into the night, and wonder why the memory of them stung. Sansa went to the sept and prayed for a story with the ending she had once been promised. Arya went to the yard and practiced striking a post with the wooden sword until her hands blistered and broke and bled, and she did not stop. Ned sent for a map of the city's wells and cisterns. Stannis had the ships drawn up in the river like teeth. On the 4th day, ambassadors came from the Reach, green and gold and smiling. Renly was behind them somewhere with a host that smelled of roses, and they made their courtesy to the king and offered words that were round as ripe fruit. "We prefer peace," they said, and marched anyway, only on a different map. "The city is a woman with too many suitors," Davos said under his breath as they left. "We should be careful or she'll marry none and run off with a sellsword." "Do not be a poet," Stannis said flatly. "It does not suit you." "It does not suit you either," Davos said, grinning, and for a moment a small warmth like a coal glowed and then went dark. The storm broke at last in a sky that had decided to be clear, the sort of injustice that makes men giddy with hatred for the gods. Tywin sent Gregor Clegane near the King's Road to tear at the city's flanks with fire, and while men looked toward smoke, a smaller force tested the mud gate with ladders and shields like turtles. They were thrown down. Boiling oil made a scream that was not human, and pitch made a smell that would live in men's beards for years. Arrows darkened a patch of air. Stones made meat of men. Through it all, Bywater's voice was a bell. Ser Mandon did everything correctly, which is to say without humanity. Barristan was everywhere. A white blur moved. Ned, at the walls, felt a keen cold that had nothing to do with wind. At dusk, the attacks faltered and drew back, and men cheered not triumph but reprieve. Tyrion sat his horse within sight of the walls and tried to make figures in the dust with the end of a switch. His father watched without expression. "They hold," Tyrion said. "They'll hold tomorrow, too." "They will hold until something breaks," Tywin replied. His eyes were on the city, but his mind was far ahead, counting days as if they were coppers. "Send men to the river mouth. Fire ships come. If they are not yet made, they will be soon. The onion sells bread." "The onion sells many things," Tyrion said. "He is one of the few cooks in this place." "The onion," Tywin said, "shall be cut." At midnight, a door opened that should not have been able to open. It did so because it had never been truly closed, because Ruggan held keys to doors that had not been made with keys. Cersei stepped through a space that had been a wall and then a shadow and then a path. She moved like a knife with legs. Varys smiled and bowed and held a lantern and never quite looked at her. "There is a boat," he said, "and a cloak for a boy and a cloak for a man and a cloak for a woman. Don't choose the brightest. Choose the one that looks like the one a fish would wear if fish wore anything." Cersei took the darkest cloak. "If I die," she said conversationally, "I will haunt you." "If you die," Varys said, "I will be out of a job." He led her through a coil of passages where the air smelled of coal and old brine and something else older. They passed a door behind which a man breathed softly, and Cersei thought of breaking it open and taking the tiny life she heard and did not. The lantern made the world small. At the river tunnel, a small boat waited with 2 oars and a third on the floor. A man in a hood sat in it like a sack of old clothes, and when he lifted his head his eyes were dead asleep and yet watchful. He had the smell of the sea and the sound of silence. She stepped into the boat and knelt and did not look back. The city above her dreamed. The river received her as if she had always been meant for it. Varys pushed the boat with careful hands and then let it go with a sigh. On the walls, Bywater marked a lantern moving where none should be. He frowned and moved his hand, and a bough beside him bent. Not to shoot, but to bring a string to his ear so he could feel the hum. "Hum," he murmured, and did not call out, because the thing he felt was not that the queen was escaping, but that something as large as that was moving, and he did not yet know in what direction. At dawn, the bells rang again, but this time it was not for a king or a death. It was a confusion. 3 bells here, 1 there, a jumble, and people tumbled into streets because the sound had always meant that the world was telling them something. Rumor sprang into the light with a box's lid flung open. The queen had fled. The queen had been murdered. The queen had turned into a fish and swum away. The queen had grown wings. The queen had turned to stone. Ned went to the cells and found them empty of a presence that had filled them like perfume. He found Ruggan staring at a wall with a shocked expression that was very neatly painted on. He found a guard with a pinched mouth and no answers. He found a cold weight at the base of his spine. "She is gone," Barristan said, and those 3 small words were like stones dropped into a still pool. They made ripples that went on and on. "Janos," Ned said. "Bywater. Every gate. No cart leaves without being seen. No ship." "It was the water," Barristan said quietly. "We are too late." Stannis took the news like a man takes a blow he had decided not to flinch from. He read the sea's face as if it were a page in a stern book. "She goes to her father," he said. "She goes to sharpen teeth." Ned stared out over the green water. The gulls wheeled and cried as if the sea had told a joke. "Then we'll need to teach our city to bite." War came as it always does, not in a single wave, but by the steady wearing away of shores. The Lannisters pressed. The Tyrells hovered, smiles fixed as armor. In the north, wolves answered. Robb Stark crossed the neck with a river's patience and a river's relentless. Catelyn stood on battlements and offered prayers in a god's language she did not fully trust and yet could not burn out of herself. The realm bulged with iron and hunger and songs that had not yet been sung. In King's Landing, the stink of pitch permeated everything. Sansa went about like a lady because there was nothing else left to be. She learned the names of the captains at the gate and the names of the boys who brought bread and when to arrange her face like calm. Arya balanced on a low wall with her arms out like wings and almost fell twice and laughed and did it again and did not fall. Ned grew thinner and harder and kinder. He held the city in his palms and did not show how it had bitten him. Tyrion came again to parley, this time with a face more tired and a wit honed on stones. "You are very hard to top, Lou," he told Ned, with something like respect in the corners of his eyes. "I suspect it's because you do not try to stand on anything but your feet." "You will not take this city," Ned said. "Probably not," Tyrion agreed cheerfully. "But it wastes us nothing to try." He looked up at the walls. "Your Bywater is a clever man. I would like to steal him." "Many have tried to steal men by killing them," Ned said. "It is not theft. It is breaking." "Well," Tyrion said, "I have been broken often." He tipped an imaginary cup. "To the next break, Lord Stark. May it be survivable." He took news back to his father that was exact and unsparing. Tywin placed the news next to other pieces. The Queen's escape, the temper of the Tyrells, the reach of the Stag and Onion ships, and made a shape out of them while never so much as letting a hair fall out of place. "We make the city bleed without stabbing it," he said at last. "We cut the road, we take the outfarms, we poison the wells if we must." Kevin winced. "That will wake hate," he said. "Let it," Tywin replied. "Hate is a plow. We will sow with it." On a night when the moon was very thin and the river very black, Arya slipped from her bed and went to the ramparts and stared south. She thought of a road that had taken her past a man with yellow eyes, of a butcher's boy and a crown made of flowers that had not fit right, of a wolf that lived in her skull like a secret. She thought of people saying her name in a far hall and not hearing an answer. She thought of the way Sirio's foot slid just so and of the way he had caught her wrist in his hand like a bird and shown her how to fly. Sansa lay in bed and whispered the names of the women of Winterfell she had known. Her mother, Old Nan, Beth, Jane. She whispered them like beads on a string and found that the words themselves were warm. For the first time she did not wish to be anywhere but where she was, because the people who needed her were those who loved her and they were here. It was not the ending she had wanted. It was the beginning she would try to learn. Ned stood in his armor as the first of the great assaults formed beyond arrow range. A slow flower of banners and shields and the sound of drums, and felt the oddest sensation wash him. Not fear, not pride, but something that felt like the moment when, in Winterfell, he had stepped onto ice that held, the creak under his boot unmistakable and yet somehow a comfort. The law was like that sometimes. Fragile, sure. Crackable. But it held if men did not dance too violently. "Winter is when men remember promises," he said to no one, and pulled his helmet on. Below, in the carnivorous light, men sharpened swords that had killed men yesterday and would kill men tomorrow. Swallows chased each other under the eaves as if the day belonged to them. The city took a breath and then another and then another. The drums called. The horns answered. The world moved and kept moving. In the heart of it, a queen rode under a red banner, her jaw set, her hair bound so tight it hurt. Beside her, a dwarf grinned and wished he were anywhere else and knew he was exactly where he belonged. Behind them all, in a silence no one felt, a spider spun a web through which the passing of a fly would not be felt until it was too late to pull free. Eddard Stark met war with the steadiness men had expected from him and the ruthlessness they never had. The black cells he had secured now held other men with gilded names. The Red Keep he had turned into a fortress held. The girls he had told to be brave were brave. The king he had seated on a throne that was always hungry sat and ate bread and wrote orders and did not smile and made the city choose a harder peace than it had ever wanted. The bells rang again after some time nobody counted. They rang because men had died and men had lived, and because in King's Landing, no matter who sat where, bells had to ring or the city would forget itself. They rang for the small folk who had cooked soup and buried sons and traded tokens and courtesies as if the world were not ending, as if acting as though it were not made it so. No one, later, could say when exactly the hinge of it all had turned. Some put it in the cell, when the queen's breath fogged on a cold stone. Some set it in the arch of the hearing, with a book's spine creaking open. Others placed it on dawn steps where a hard-faced man had been given a crown. But those who loved the old songs and those who hated songs altogether agreed in spite of themselves that the night a northern lord had chosen iron over delay was the night when everything else became possible. The mercies, the horrors, the smaller, quieter births of the sort of days where children grow tall and swords grow dull. The city kept its eyes open. The realm pretended to be simple and failed gloriously. The wolves in men's hearts and in northern woods watched with equal patience. And somewhere, on a far road neither map nor men remembered, a white hart put its nose into the wind, scented smoke and salt and winter and the rank sweetness of new grass, and trotted forward without fear.